Hello, Nate Saunders and Laurence Edmondson here at Barcelona Circuit de Catalunya. We've just finished 6 days of pre-season testing for the 2020 Formula 1 season. Mercedes quickest overall, both on Friday here and with the quickest time from testing. Laurence, we've been keeping quite a close eye on the performance runs today. Max Verstappen just under a tenth behind Valtteri Bottas, different tyre compounds. You were looking at some of the race simulations. We were down at trackside as they were kind of setting some of those quick laps. What have you made of things so far?
Well, there's so much information, it's really a case of trying to pick it apart and trying to understand which bits are relevant, which bits aren't. That's the problem we face in testing. I think what we can say with some certainty is that Mercedes are going to Australia with a target on their back. They look like the fastest team, but Red Bull are certainly up there, and we've seen this a couple of times before in testing that Red Bull look good, but there's some very strong signs, especially that run by Max Verstappen today. The rest of the tests they've been kind of conceding their pace a little bit, but it wasn't just that C4 lap on the fastest lap he did on those tyres, those slight soft tyres. There are also some good laps on the C3s and the C2, so even through the whole compound range, he looked pretty good. Biggest question I think coming out of this test is where Ferrari are. They don't look good on one lap pace compared to the other two top teams. They're comfortably ahead of the midfield, I still think. But I did, as you said, I looked at some of their long run pace. They did 2 race sims in the last 2 days. Both have looked pretty good actually. The only problem is that we don't have anything direct to compare with Mercedes and Red Bull. So I think Ferrari are thereabouts, but there's definitely some work to be done, and they are going into Australia admitting that they are behind on one lap pace, certainly, and probably on race pace as well, and having to catch up. So we'll see where they are come Australia.
And that's kind of where we were. We didn't really realise it 12 months ago, but that's where we actually were going into 2019. We just had much higher expectations about Ferrari, and they've obviously been trying to keep those expectations in check. I think a lot of people were kind of waiting for a big headline time from Ferrari, kind of to confirm a lot of people's suspicions that maybe Ferrari were holding something back. But like you say, they seem to be the third team in that cluster. Looking behind those guys, the midfield looks fascinating this year. We've obviously been talking about the pink Mercedes, as it's been dubbed, the Racing Point, which to me looks maybe like the best car in that midfield. I mean, they've been talking a really big game. How do you see that midfield forming? Because I think that's going to be fascinating in Melbourne, actually working out who's where and seeing who is the best team and how close they are to those top 3.
The Racing Point's definitely quick. We've seen that certainly in fast corners in the first 2 sectors of this lap. It looks very good. Not so good in the final sector, which is interesting. And also, the other thing you'll remember with that Racing Point is it's a complete concept change for Racing Point. So they're going from one type of car to another, and there's a lot of understanding. I think they're very happy with what they've learned here, but there's still a lot of understanding to do. So when you go to a completely different track like Australia, there's a chance that maybe there'll be a few surprises. Whereas McLaren, actually looking at McLaren's race pace, it actually looks potentially better than Racing Point. I think on single lap pace, maybe not. Again, really hard to tell. But McLaren are definitely up there with Racing Point. So I actually think by the time we get to Australia, the knowledge that McLaren have around that concept of car, the fact that it's basically an evolution of what they had last year, is probably going to stand them in good stead. So I would say that McLaren and also Renault looked very, very good on one lap here. I didn't really get a chance to look at the long run pace so much, again because they didn't do it at the right time for me to get the notes on it, and to compare it with the others. But that car overall looks pretty solid, and that's what you'd expect. You'd expect McLaren and Renault to be at the front of that midfield, and then with Racing Point taking a bit of a punt with this new concept, with what looks very much like last year's Mercedes. Well, if they get it right, you'd certainly expect them to be in that pack as well. So rest of the teams, I think, are looking a little bit mixed behind. Alpha Tauri are maybe not quite as far ahead as they'd like to be. They have some great hardware in that car. You know, they've got Red Bull gearbox, suspension, all the things that should make it quick. But from everything I've seen, and again, there's always the caveats of testing, from everything I've seen, they're not quite with the other 3 we were just talking about. Then Haas also seems to be a little bit back. Alfa Romeo, I'm a bit worried about. They seem to be struggling a bit. And Williams has certainly closed the gap from the back. But I think they're still facing, somebody's got to be at the back of the grid, and I think it's still probably them for now.
Yeah, Williams definitely closer, but I tend to agree with you. And on the Renault point, we spoke to Daniel Ricciardo at lunch, when at the time he was top of the timing screens, and he kind of joked that he was on pole position for Australia, but he said while he knows he's not going to be first, second, third, fourth, whatever in Australia, it's better for them that they, on their performance runs, were P1 and not P6 and with the other midfield teams. So quite curious to see what Renault do in Australia. If you had to predict right now a team from the midfield to snatch a podium in the season, I know Racing Point have kind of been talking a big game about doing that. Do you think they're the team that could do that? I know we might need some extreme circumstances, do you think it would be them? Do you think it would be McLaren or one of the other teams?
Yeah, I would go with Racing Point because they have a history of doing that. Okay, car wasn't quite there last year, wasn't quite there the year before, but that was a money issue. But before that, they had a history of getting podiums at times when you wouldn't expect it. So I think they've got everything there for that, and also I think that car is going to be very quick at certain types of circuits. Circuits where we've got lots of high-speed corners, I think they're going to be a step above maybe some of the other midfield cars. And and if things start to play up, if things go slightly wrong amongst the top three, they're going to be there to pounce. But there's been some speculation that maybe they're up there with Ferrari even, and everything that I've seen doesn't suggest that. But it would be interesting to see if they are.
It would be incredible if they were. But as you can see behind us, probably everything's starting to pack up. All of this stuff is going back to the UK, back to Italy, wherever it's going. Australian Grand Prix on March the 15th. So keep it here with us on ESPN, and we'll see just how right we are at this stage about the pecking order in Formula One.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.